Hi everyone, welcome back to Property Couple. My name's Leah and today we're going to talk a little bit about the Help to Buy shared ownership scheme. In this video I'm going to cover what shared ownership is, who is eligible and some pros and cons of shared ownership in my opinion. So before I get going, I thought I'd mention that I've also made two other videos on the Help to Buy scheme, including Help to Buy ISA and the Help to Buy equity loan. It's worth watching those if you're interested in using more than one of the government's Help to Buy opportunities, because they can be used in collaboration with each other. It says here on the Gov website you can use the Help to Buy ISA with any other government schemes, including the Help to Buy equity loan and shared ownership scheme. So they can be used at the same time as each other. You're not limited to just one of them. So if you're house hunting but you haven't quite got the funds to buy 100% of a property, then shared ownership might be for you. So what is shared ownership? What does it actually mean? In simple terms, it means that you don't own 100% of the property that you buy. You might buy 25% of that property, you might buy 50%, you might buy 75% of it. The government own the remaining percentage of that property. So to qualify for shared ownership, you or your partner must have a combined salary of less than £80,000 or 90,000 if you're living in London. Also, it's really worth knowing that you will be buying a leasehold of a property. You will not be buying a freehold. If you're interested in what the difference between a leasehold and a freehold is, then I'm making another video on that, so do check that out. I will link it up in the cards on the side. The reason I mention about the leasehold is because usually you'd have to be paying some sort of ground rent which goes towards maintenance work. This comes under a monthly service charge. This cost on the percentage of the property that you do not own, as well as the monthly maintenance charge, also known as the service charge, are the two big payments you're going to be factoring into your monthly costs of living in this home. Even after just explaining like a little bit of shared ownership, I can see why it's really confusing and off-putting and why people don't really want to go anywhere near it. But really, if you are someone who just wants to get on the property ladder, you've got less money but you want to get in, this could be an option for you. And at the end of the video, I'm going to go through some of the advantages and disadvantages of this scheme, as well as my personal opinion on it. So you might be thinking, why does this even exist? Why has this shared ownership scheme been created? Well, if you think about it plainly, if you purchase between 25 to 75% of a property and you borrow the money with a mortgage to buy that share of a property, then your monthly mortgage costs are going to be lower because you're borrowing less money. If you were to borrow more money to buy a more expensive home, your monthly costs are going to be higher. If you borrow less money, of course, your monthly costs will be less. So because of this reduction in mortgage cost, it means you can put down an even smaller deposit, sometimes even smaller than you think. I'm on a private developer's website right now. They're giving an example of a 2-bedroom property in a nice new development that could cost you as little as £33,750 for a 25% share in the property. So that means that your deposit would only be £3,375. So with people that choose this scheme, they often want to increase the amount of equity that they have in their home, naturally. Why would anyone only want to own 25% of their home? They obviously want to own the whole thing one day. So what the government has introduced is like a staircasing scheme where you can buy more equity in your property as time goes on. Equity is the value of how much of your house that you own. So if at the beginning you've put £33,000 into your home, that is how much equity you have in your house. As time goes on, you might buy more equity so that that pot builds up and you own a bigger and bigger and bigger percentage of your home. With the way that house prices have gone through the roof and salaries have stayed the same over the past however many years, it does make sense that the government have introduced this scheme, because otherwise how else will people actually realistically get on the property ladder? I can totally understand why this exists. I can see why it's a little bit of a headache. At the same time, it's like, okay, I'm going to buy it, but I'm only going to buy 25% and then I need to rent off the government what I don't own, and then I've got maintenance costs, try and buy more shares. It does sound like a bit of a headache, and I think that's because it is. If I'm being totally honest, this is just my opinion. I think the ongoing buying of equity in your property can be a bit of a headache. Most people just get a mortgage and pay their monthly costs, and before you know it, in however many years, they eventually own the entire property. It could take them 50 years. but still, they eventually own their property. But with this staircasing structure, you've got to constantly take active steps towards buying more shares in your property, and with that comes complications such as solicitor fees, getting a valuation done because their home might have grown in value since you bought it, and other complications. On the other hand, there is also a huge potential here to grow your equity without really doing anything by just living in that house. So for example, if you bought a 50% share in a £120,000 home, so you paid £60,000 for your 50% share, then just say the value of that home then became worth £140,000 a few years down the line, then suddenly your 50% share is now worth £70,000. That's a 10 grand capital appreciation for you for the shares in your home that you own. There are positives and negatives to everything. This is one of the ways you can grow equity without doing anything. One of the things that's worth mentioning, which I also mentioned in my Help to Buy equity loan video, is that subletting or renting out the property is not allowed. You can't just get the property, use the shared ownership scheme to put a little amount of money down, get in and then get tenants in. That's not allowed. This is to help people that need a home get on the property ladder. That is what the intention must be, and if you were to lie about that, that could be mortgage fraud, so you don't want to do that. Just don't get into trouble. One of the biggest things to watch out for when buying a shared ownership property is your ability to be able to own 100% of the property. When I was doing some digging, I actually found there were some properties that limited the percentage you're allowed in total over the entire period of time of ownership. To me, it doesn't really make much sense for you to never be able to own 100% of the property, but for some reason there's some that cap it off at like 75%, which means that forever you will be constantly paying a small rent to the government, who own the remaining percentage. So is this the government's way of also getting money from you even though you think you're a homeowner and you've got equity in a property? I don't know. I don't want to put that out there in case it's wrong, but to me, I just think it's a bit unfair. So a way to get around this is to ask the housing provider when you're doing viewings, when you're on the phone, can I own 100% of this property one day, or is it capped? Also, with the staircasing, which is buying more equity in the home, you want to ask, can I start staircasing immediately, or is there limitations on that? You want to find out all of these intricacies, because you don't want to get into this deal and then find out that you can only staircase a really small amount of times. It's just going to limit you, and it means that you're constantly going to be paying that rent to the government when you could have been progressing further with how much equity you have in your home. If you are currently somebody who is renting a property and you're considering the shared ownership scheme, then you really want to do your numbers and figure out how much your total monthly spend is going to be where you eventually move to with a shared ownership, compared to how much you currently pay as a renter and never owning that home. So most of these housing providers are probably going to tell you when you meet with them or talk to them that your monthly outgoings are going to be less, because they obviously want you to invest in these homes. And you probably will be told that your total monthly cost will work out cheaper than what it is renting, and you're going to be building equity, and you know what I mean, there's going to be that sort of financial gain long term because you own a percentage of your home. Just do the numbers yourself. And the way to do that is to use mortgage calculators, figure out what kind of monthly cost you're going to be in for, look at the ground rent, look at the terms and restrictions within the lease, check how much of an increase you can expect to see with the monthly maintenance cost. Maybe ask someone else who's doing this how much their monthly costs have gone up whilst they've been living in one of these shared ownership homes. It's always worth just doing all of the digging before you get yourself into something that you regret. If you are someone who rents a property as well, you might be familiar with the fact that you can't paint the walls, bang nails in, hang up pictures, do whatever you want. You can't customize your own home really unless you've got a very flexible landlord. Whereas with a shared ownership, the house is yours. You can do whatever you want to it. Usually, whatever you sign, just double check that you're not breaking any terms, because you don't want to get somewhere and for it to feel like you're just renting again, because no doubt with the mortgage that you're paying off and the rent you're paying back to the government and the maintenance costs, because with all the bills you're paying off, you don't want to feel like this house truly isn't yours, because that's not the whole idea that you did this. If you've watched my other Help to Buy videos, you'll know that there are some restrictions where you can only buy new build homes using the government loan. Whereas with the shared ownership scheme, you're not tied to just new builds. It says here that you can buy a newly built home or an existing one through resale programs from housing associations. As long as you see that little thing on Rightmove where it says shared ownership, you should be fine. Yeah, just know that you're not tied to a new build. Just some more things to watch out for before we finish up the video. As I mentioned earlier about capital appreciation, you could also be at risk of falling into negative equity. So negative equity is when you owe the mortgage lender or the bank more money than what your house is worth. So for example, if you bought a house that's worth £150,000, but you borrowed £120,000 to buy it, and you paid the £30,000 to make up the 150, and then a few years later, that house then became worth £100,000, you now owe the bank more than what the entire house is worth, if that makes sense. However, on the other hand, if you bought a house for 150, borrowed 120, but the house then became worth 130 in evaluation, you wouldn't be in negative equity because 130 is still more than 120, which is what you borrowed. I hope that makes sense. I might go into more detail on negative equity in another video. The reason why a Help to Buy candidate who's going for shared ownership should be aware of this is because of the premium that housing associations pop on top of a new build. So if you're going for a new build, and you walk in, everything's shiny and brand new. It's like buying a brand new car. As soon as you drive away from the as soon as you drive away from the car dealership, that car has just dropped in value by thousands, probably. Exactly the same with new builds. You pay for the fact that you're the first person to live there. It's shiny, it's brand new. I hope that makes sense. If I haven't put you off shared ownership enough, then there's also some more things you should probably think about, such as when you come to selling that home that you bought through shared ownership. It's worth noting that often the housing provider has first refusal to buy back the property off you before it goes on the open market. So the process isn't straightforward. It's not going to be like just putting your house on the market with an estate agent. You do have to talk to the housing provider, the association you bought it from. They might have a list of other people waiting to get in on a shared ownership scheme that are unable to buy on the open market. So it's likely that the home will be sold back to them. In a way, you're kind of trapped. You can only sell it to them, and they might put in a cheeky offer. It's just a little bit shady for me. I don't think it's suitable for me where I'm at in my life right now, but this isn't about me, it's about you. So definitely do all your research. I'm going to leave some useful links in the description, some really good reading, and a website that can help you with your mortgage calculation on shared ownership. So do all of the digging, do all the due diligence, and yeah, you should be in a better place to make some decisions once you've done all that research. Good luck, and I hope to see you in my next video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!